independent military families, the husbands and wives of the men and women in the military, has begun conducting briefings for dependents. These would be the dependents that are stationed near the East Coast, the Atlantic Ocean, near the West Coast, the Pacific Ocean, and near the Gulf Coast. At these briefings, they're being told the following: that there's this planetary-sized object called Nibiru that's coming into our solar system. It's going to be causing very severe problems, much more so than it already is, very soon, and that they're being put on standby to bug out. They're being told that there'll be little notice, possibly 2 weeks or so, before they're given the notice to bug out. Oh, they're also, by the way, they're being shown a map. Advance 4 to 6 weeks is probably pretty likely. Probably not more than 3 or 4 months. So that's our belief. I hope we're wrong. I hope that this turns out to be incorrect information.
We all know the story of Noah and the flood, but according to some researchers, there could be as many as 200 different deluge stories from ancient cultures throughout the world. So this begs the obvious question: in terms of science, what single causality could yield such a global diversity of deluge stories? For that, we look back to 1940, when a Chilean astronomer by the name of Carlos Ferrada first postulated an explanation that accounts for all of these deluge stories. An explanation based on 2 objects. One he calls the Black Star, and the other an object he called Hercules, or what we know today as Planet X or Nibiru. According to Ferrada, Hercules is a large comet planet charged with cosmic energy in an elliptical orbit between the 2 suns of our own solar system, Sol and its smaller, dark twin, Nemesis. A man of great intellect and insight, Ferrada tells us that this object does not follow established celestial laws, which in turn explains its bizarre behaviors. He also predicts that during this next coming flyby, this massive object will come within 14 million kilometers of Earth, and that it will be naked eye visible from every point of the globe. Yes, we will all see it, and we will photograph it. But when will we all come to believe our own eyes? Well, that might be quite another thing. Hopefully, it will be in time for us to find safety from the coming cataclysm. And what shall that be? It will be a horrific event predicted by Edgar Cayce, a great American psychic known as the Sleeping Prophet. A pole shift. And so, what would the celestial mechanics of such an event look like? It would look like the one that haunted Ferrada in this 1999 interview late in his life. There are so many things which is unfortunate. Mankind is not ready. The change comes. The destruction comes. And above all, will affect humanity in its existence, in its production, and in its own substance. As our research team watched Ferrada in this interview, what tore at our hearts were not his words, but rather the obvious pain of awareness etched on his face. We know that pain all too well, for it is an echo of our own, and the knowing of a horrific cataclysm to come, and that which causes it. And so we call it the Ferrada-Cayce pole shift, and it will happen when these massive objects pass close enough to gain a lithosphere lock on the Earth, thereby pulling the skin of our planet around. This will cause the pole shift predicted by Edgar Cayce over 90 years ago. Carlos Ferrata first began talking about Hercules, or what we call Planet X, Nibiru, in 1940. And through all those decades of talking to audiences and giving TV interviews, in the back of his mind, you know he was seeing the celestial mechanics of the coming global cataclysm we're going to experience. And, you know, it makes you wonder, how did he see it in his mind? Well, what we're going to try and attempt in this program is to convey a sense of that to you as we explore that coming pole shift. In this program, we're going to take you into the future to show you a cataclysm that means, well, frankly, the end of life as we know it. But it will not be the end of us. Rather, humanity has a long journey ahead of it, and this is just going to be one waypoint along the path. But, as with all journeys, they do have a beginning, and that beginning for us is that first dawn of awareness about what is to come. And for that, we go to the past. In the first program in the Planet X 101 series, Who, What, When, Where, Why, and How, we explained how the search for Planet X first began in 1781. However, the chronological starting point for our journey today is much closer to our own time. In 1940, a Chilean astronomer by the name of Carlos Muñoz Ferrata first began talking about an object he called Hercules, or what we know today as Planet X, or Nibiru. But he also talked about not one, but two objects. Hercules is the same planet Zecharia Sitchin, author of the 12th Planet, describes as Nibiru, according to his translations of the ancient Sumerian texts. And according to Sitchin, it is 4 times the size of Earth. But of even greater concern to us is the black sun, as Ferrata calls it. A binary twin to our own sun that is 56 times the size of Earth. And it is the core object of a mini-constellation we call the Planet X system, which in turn orbits around our own sun, much like a comet would. Therefore, Ferrata is the pivotal figure in this program because he was the first professional astronomer to talk about the Planet X system, as we call it, back in 1940. The small sun he referred to as the black sun is actually a brown dwarf star known to present-day astronomers as Nemesis. Brown dwarfs are small protostars that lack the mass to sustain hydrogen fusion like Sol. Consequently, they are very dark stars and extremely difficult to find. It is why they're also referred to as failed stars. In fact, the existence of brown dwarf stars wasn't theorized until the 1960s, and back then, they were initially called black dwarfs. Consequently, it wasn't until 1988 before the first brown dwarf was discovered. And as of 2012, over 1,800 of these brown dwarf stars have been discovered. We know them today as brown dwarfs thanks to American astronomer Jill Tarter, who first coined the term in 1975. It's interesting to note that the protagonist, Ellie Arroway, played by Jodie Foster, was based on Tarter's astronomical work. The modern hunt for Planet X began with the deep space probes Pioneer 10 launched in 1972 and Pioneer 11 launched in 1973. These missions established the existence of something of substantial mass because it had significantly altered the trajectories of both probes. In 1983, the infrared astronomical satellite, IRAS, was launched to image that mass. According to NASA, IRAS failed before the mission could be completed. However, several government whistleblowers have since come forward to say IRAS had in fact imaged Planet X. It is also important to know that the disclosures of these whistleblowers are consistent with the news accounts of that time. Most notable was a New York Times article published on January 30th, 1983, which states, "More credence was given to the hypothesis that a brown dwarf accounts for the mysterious force. Moreover, a brown dwarf in the neighborhood might not reflect enough light to be seen far away," said Dr. John Anderson of the Jet Propulsion Laboratory in Pasadena, California. Keep that name in mind as we move forward to 1988. This is a 2013 capture of Dr. John Anderson's NASA biopage. So what we know about this astronomer is that he does indeed work for NASA, and that he has been following the topic of Planet X for years. Frankly, he's in a league of his own as the last of the honest NASA astronomers to come forward on this topic. In a June 14, 1988 interview with the Victoria Advocate titled Pioneer 10 Still Searching, Anderson is directly quoted as saying, "We have a 90 to 99% confidence that Uranus and Neptune are being disturbed, and by one candidate for that is a single Planet X." Sourced from the Google News service, Yowza.com first published this Victoria Advocate interview with Dr. Anderson on March 18, 2012, in an article titled "The Planet X Cover-Up in the Mainstream Media." Immediately after publication of that article, the entire Victoria Advocate edition for that day was removed from the Google News Service site. No doubt, our tax dollars at work once again. Redactions aside, 1988 was still a bellwether year for Planet X research, thanks to the efforts of Dr. Robert S. Harrington, chief astronomer for the United States Naval Observatory, because in October of that year he published a paper titled "The Location of Planet X." And here you see Dr. Harrington being interviewed by Zecharia Sitchin, author of The 12th Planet, for a network documentary. In that interview, Dr. Harrington showed Sitchin an orbital diagram for Planet X. Interestingly enough, in this illustration created by Dr. Harrington, we see the description, "Orbit of Nibiru," the very same planet that Sitchin maintains exists according to his translation of the ancient Sumerian texts. It is likewise noteworthy that Harrington commissioned the construction of a special telescope for a Planet X sky survey, which was conducted in 1991 at the Black Birch Observatory in New Zealand. Those observations were based on Harrington's calculations, and the films were delivered directly to NASA and never seen again. And in a manner of speaking, neither was Harrington. As reported in our Yowza.com article, Planet X and the Mysterious Death of Dr. Robert Harrington, this courageous astronomer died on January 23, 1993, from a rapid onset of esophageal cancer. Many believe he was assassinated, as do we. Today, NASA has replaced the Planet X research of men like Anderson and Harrington with a Planet X debunker by the name of David Morrison, a man who maintains that Planet X does not exist and who never misses an opportunity to humiliate anyone with an interest in the topic. So in response to David Morrison, I offer my first Planet X article published in January 2002 as way of introducing a pithy insight from the man who helped me to write that article. He was Dr. Brian Geoffrey Marsden, and at that time he was a senior astronomer at the Smithsonian Astrophysical Observatory. Regrettably, he passed away in 2010, and to honor his memory, I believe something he once told me is the best way to respond to David Morrison. The failure to observe an object only means that you have failed to observe the object. It should be noted that following the mysterious death of astronomer Robert Harrington in 1993, the Planet X topic went dark in the mainstream media because it had become a death topic. And with that, we now take a big step forward to the year 2006. On April 26, 2006, Yowza.com was the first to break the story on the South Pole Telescope in terms of Planet X. The SPT, as it is commonly referred to as, is a 10-meter diameter telescope located at the Amundsen-Scott South Pole Station in Antarctica. Simply put, it is the ideal infrared telescope for observing anything rising up from the southern skies, like the Planet X system and its brown dwarf. The official reasons given for constructing this telescope in the most inhospitable region of the world sound noble, but in fact do not justify the expense. The Amundsen-Scott South Pole Station is only accessible by way of specially modified C-130 aircraft. Consequently, flying in the telescope and its support building was a Herculean effort. This is why the same exact science could have been done for a fraction of the cost elsewhere in the southern hemisphere. So why not save the money with a better location? Well, as we pointed out in our article, this was the ideal place to observe the southern approach of the Planet X system at that time. Then came the news we hoped for in 2008. A whistleblower posted Planet X images taken with the SPT on YouTube under the name Nibiru Shock 2012. Here you see the images he posted in his video that were captured by the SPT in January 2008. What is clearly obvious here is that we are looking at a mini constellation and not a single object. So let's take an enhanced look at these images. What we see is the strong infrared signature of a brown dwarf star, and between 5 to 7 planets in orbit around it, depending on how you define a planet. In this close-up provided by Nibiru Shock 2012, he also points out that the brown dwarf has a tail. This can be attributed to the fact that Nemesis, the brown dwarf seen here in the center of the image, is surrounded by a massive dust disk. Ergo, if we could actually see this brown dwarf in space, it would likely look something similar to this animation. The problem this presents for us here on Earth is that at some point in the future we will pass through this dust disk, if we're not already doing so. In addition to the January 2008 images provided by Nibiru Shock 2012, a second whistleblower came forward in May of that year with another SPT image. This second whistleblower named his SPT source in the video, and the government removed it within hours after it was up. With this in mind, we have redacted that information so that for the first time you can see what his source provided him. And this brings us to the final step in our pole shift chronology. On February 11, 2013, we published our YouTube video titled Object of Interest as Seen from the Turrialba Volcano. Using surveillance camera images captured from the Turrialba volcano, we began ongoing observations of an object I initially dubbed Blue Bonnet on January 7th of that year. The site for this surveillance camera is on the 10th parallel and at an altitude of approximately 11,000 feet with a clear view to the southwest. Our analysis also shows that this object entered the constellation Ophiuchus on December 1, 2012, and was well inside that constellation as of December 21, 2012. This means that the prophecy of Nostradamus for this object was in fact fulfilled exactly as predicted. Bluebonnet, as we first called it, is near the Sun, and so with all objects near to the Sun, it can only be observed before sunrise or before sunset. Also note, we eliminated all of the expected explanations for this object, such as it being the planet Venus, which it is not. In fact, this is not a cataloged object, and it has been observed from this location with not one, but with 3 uniquely different camera systems since early 2010. Having captured literally hundreds of images of this object ourselves, we began to wonder if Bluebonnet, as we called it, was actually Nibiru, the outermost orbital of the Planet X system. Well, we got an answer. On July 12, 2013, a video titled "A Cyclical Storm Brews" was posted by the 00 Skyview team. This highly capable group of amateur astronomers confirmed our suspicion that we had in fact been observing Nibiru all this time. In their video, they state, "We have researched the object and here are our findings." Here you see our object, Bluebonnet, which we now know to be Nibiru, and which has been observed since early 2010 from surveillance cameras at the Turrialba volcano in Costa Rica. Likewise, the 00 Skyview team also confirms that we first observed it in the constellation Ophiuchus. According to their findings, Nibiru, or Bluebonnet if you will, is the outermost orbital of the Planet X system. Please keep in mind that the celestial mechanics of what is going to happen in our near future are so complex that it's really impossible to say with any certainty exactly what is going to happen and when.
Correct information. If it is, well, that's great. If it's not, if it turns out to be correct, then you've got your heads up. So I asked the question this morning to all of you out there, to the several thousand of you listening to me on the morning of July 11th. What would you do if you had 6 years to prepare? What would you do if you had 6 months to prepare? What would you do if you had 6 weeks to prepare? Mike, it was 2 weeks ago today that I announced the information I received from 2 confidential sources. One was a confidential source who is a dependent of a Department of Defense employee, part of continuity of government contingency planning, by the way. Not all DOD and not all government employees are part of COG, continuity of government contingency planning. Anyway, at this briefing, which they had to sign a non-disclosure agreement before the briefing began, they were told that they were being put on standby for evacuation, that they may get as much as 2 weeks' notice, they may not. And they started telling these dependents about Nibiru, Planet X, and how this planetary-sized object was going to cause massive flooding on all coastal areas. And that was pretty much it for that source. The second source is in the Department of Homeland Security, and that source basically confirmed what the first source said without going any further on that. And then the following day, or the same day, I should say, you came up with your own sources, Mike, and why don't you tell us about those?
Well, the source that first told me about this, and I've been doing some digging since then, but the source that first told me about this is a director-level individual for a foreign intelligence agency that I have occasion to speak with now and then. And what I was told, and I was told this probably maybe 60 or 90 days ago, and I didn't put a lot of credence in it at the time, but as I've researched, I have to put more and more credence in it. And as a qualifier, I have to say this up front, that, you know, perhaps this is being floated as disinformation to discredit people and to discredit. So I have to give a caveat there. I don't think it is, but it could be just that type of effort. But I was told that to be very prepared on the dates of August 17th and the dates of September 26th, that a planet-sized object would be passing its passing very, very near the Earth. And I was told that the closest distance would be maybe 5 to 10 Earth diameters. It would come that close, and that we should be be prepared for massive earthquakes, and as a result of those earthquakes, tsunami level flooding in coastal areas. Now, since that time, I've done some more digging, and I spoke with intelligence sources within the U.S. who not only confirmed that, but added some more fuel to the fire. And one of the things is that this object is coming in at an extremely high rate of speed. And what the other concern is, besides just the near passage, is that as this thing passes through the asteroid belt, it's going to disturb the stable orbits of many asteroids that are out there that are orbiting, and be like a cue ball on a billiard table and send these things going helter-skelter in every direction, so that no one knows where they're going to end up and what their ultimate destinations are going to be, and that we may be living with after effects of this for a number of years into the future.
Absolutely. And then you had a second source, I understand, as well.
Well, the second source was the one within the U.S. government. There was another. My primary source was from a foreign intelligence agency.
Right. The distance that you described, 10 times the Earth is about 24,000 miles in diameter. So 10 times that would only be 250,000 miles. That's about the distance of the moon, by the way.
Yeah, that's close. And I've been told that the size of this object could be as big as the moon. Could be. It is being tracked currently, and the primary tracking station is that large dish in Puerto Rico, I believe it is. So I'm trying to learn more and as much as I can, as quickly as I can, because this will affect a lot of people. Now, I also have to tell you, I have been told point blank information that I can't share, because I was told if I go on the air with this, that my truck's going to blow up with me in it. And
okay.
And mostly what that has to do with the high rate of speed it's traveling at, and how it achieved that high rate of speed. The term slingshot comes to mind.
Right.
So,
well, when this thing comes into our solar system, Mike, it comes up. It's coming from the south, by the way, and as it gets deeper into our solar system, approaching our sun, it picks up speed. Does a loop-to-loop around the sun, where it slows down and then it starts picking up speed as it goes back out. Now, the size you're describing is not the size I've been hearing forever for the 10th planet. This sounds like something far smaller. Our moon is a fairly small rock compared to the size of Planet X or Nibiru. So I'm a bit confused on that. I have been told also that Nibiru, or the 10th planet, has a debris field about 250,000 miles wide, which would put us well within the debris field if it's coming that close.
Well, John, I have to be honest here, and I don't know what I don't know, and I'm having a hard time discerning what is real information from what is disinformation.
Right.
Because that's one of the things that the powers that be will do. And so it's up to us to use our own discernment to try to determine, hey, what's real and what's bunk. And I'm struggling with this. I have to be very honest.
Well, and I've described this live on the air. I know you typically don't listen to my show because you're trying to get ready for your own, Mike. But typically what I do with this is, first of all, I describe the quandary that I find myself in, and I think you find yourself in also. We come across information like this from reliable sources that don't know each other. If it's true and we don't report it, then we could be directly responsible for a lot of lives being lost. If it's not true and we report it, well, then we get some egg on our face and life goes on. What I'm doing, Mike, is encouraging people to look at these dates as a opportunity for a training opportunity for us to evaluate our prudent preparedness, develop a plan A, a plan B, maybe even a plan C, to be able to evacuate if we live on a coastal area and be able to have a safe haven to go to. The dates of August 17th and September 26th may or may not be the accurate dates on one hand. On the other, the scientists I work with, and I work with a number of scientists, they're all in agreement that, yes, this thing's coming. And when it does come, it's going to cause massive flooding in all coastal areas. As you probably know, Mike, I've debriefed about 24 Navy veterans who were at the classified briefings, telling them that during their lifetime, this coastal flooding would occur. So I agree with you. It's a quandary. It's something that we need to encourage people to do their own research, to achieve their own level of discernment, and make decisions based on the knowledge that they gain.
Well, John, if worse comes to worse, it may be a good time to take the family on a camping trip and just be away from any large urban areas at all, because if something of this magnitude occurs, there's going to be mass panic. And when that happens, your freeways are going to be like parking lots, and you're not going to be able to get away. You're going to be stuck where you are. Temperatures are going to flare. People are going to become desperate. And it might not be a bad time to take advantage of a national park somewhere. Take the family out camping. Be prepared. Take as much stuff as you can. That's useful, utilitarian to you, and just be somewhere else. If you've got yourself a cabin or a vacation home, or you own rural property someplace, then better yet, it's you might, like I said, you may just want to be out of the cities.
Well,
and
you're right.
Turn it into an enjoyable occasion, like you said, a training exercise, if you will, so that you at least minimize the risk and you don't get yourself caught up in a massive urban situation, where you're sitting on a freeway and you can't move because it's bumper to bumper, and the cars around you are running out of gas because they've been sitting there for 10 hours idling.
Right. Well, I've talked occasionally, I did recently, about the aerial photograph of Houston, Texas, when people were trying to evacuate when that hurricane was headed that way. I counted the lanes up that weren't moving all in one direction. I think it was 12 or 14 lanes, interstate highway and outer roads. It was an amazing, very scary photograph. Mike, we got a caller here. James from Fort Worth. Good morning, James.
Hey, guys. How y'all doing?
Good.
I was wondering, is there anything to be looking for through other organizations, maybe the Navy around their naval bases in Norfolk and so other places, like just a sign that they're like moving everything out, getting it away from the shores? I was wondering if there's anything along those lines that maybe we could look for to give us a little bit of a heads up.
James, the Office of Naval Intelligence, ONI, have been evacuating their people from coastal areas for a while. The U.S. Navy says the East Coast will take damage up to the Blue Ridge Parkway, which is 100 miles from the ocean.
Yeah. She's literally right on the beach. She's got beachfront.
Oh, there you go.
Unfortunately, what we're looking at in terms of if this travels as has been mathematically laid out and does come by, what it will do, it will come around the sun. We have a little tiny orbit where we go around the sun. All right, and when we go around the sun, we will pass through that tail one time, and then we will make the completion of that orbit around. It will be ahead of us, so to speak, and it will go back out to the far reaches of space, and we will pass through the tail at least a second time. Now, the mathematics of this is really rather complex, but it would be about 1 hour journey through the tail of this debris the first time, probably an hour through the second time going through that debris. This will be the most devastating meteor shower that you could ever imagine in science fiction. So that's going to be one of the big problems. The first problem probably will be the electromagnetic effects that will completely shut down all electricity on the globe. So, and this is from the equivalent, let's say, of solar flares, that type of a reaction. All right? So you would have all of the electricity of the globe shut down. You will have meteor showers that we will go through at least probably twice. Now, here's where I say at least twice, and the mathematics gets a little strange. The planets of our solar system are called, they're on the elliptic plane, they call it, and it is somewhat of a flat plane. Most of all the orbits of all 9 planets, I'm still saying 9, whether they like it or not. Poor little Pluto, we don't want to cut him out. Yeah. So you got 9 planets on somewhat of a flat plane. They're all circling in different amounts of time relative to their orbits around the sun. But the Nibiru, if it comes in on our flat plane or reasonably close to it, we will go through a real, very heavily laid tail of debris and junk twice. If it comes, with some people are arguing the fact that it will be at about 30 degrees south. In other words, tipped 30 degrees off of the ecliptic plane, having it come in sort of on an angle, like just a 30-degree angle coming in, passing through our plane and back out in its own plane. If that happens, that varies things like how long we pass through the tail of debris, how many times we do or don't pass through that debris, and all of those things. So that's the stuff that, when you come down to the bottom line, throws a little monkey wrench into trying to figure out the timing on this.
You can also ask why so many underground facilities, and we're not talking about just shelters here. We're talking about literal, like, cities below ground.
Oh, yeah, no, they're gigantic. And I have, now, and I have to repeat this now, my DVD that explains all of this, took me 3 years to put this thing together. It's extraordinarily in total, and it covers everything, starting way back when and coming up to last month. Okay? It's 4 hours long. It's 2 DVDs. It explains all of it. And it has the pictures, moving pictures, underground facility moving pictures. It explains the levitation trains that they have inside. I have up on my website, I think it's up now, the list of all 103 locations of all of the facilities. I have the pictures inside the facilities. We have all of that in there. It's a 4-hour DVD. It's $24.95 as long as I'm able to still get the thing out. I've got plenty on hand. But I will say this. I did the Coast to Coast George Norrie program last week, and we had over 1,800 hits in 1 day and a half. It actually shut me down for a little bit on my site. It was unbelievable. We had a hit every 2 minutes for 24 hours. So all I can tell you is everything is there. Everything's on the DVD. If you're interested in it all, I beg you to get it so that you will be ahead of the loop. And I don't know what else I can say. When I finally came to the conclusion that there was no other answer other than the fact that this thing is coming back in, we will never be told. Here's what's going to happen now. This is the rest of it. And by the way, on my DVD, which I completed 6 months ago maybe, in terms of finally putting it into production, I point out that what is going to have to be used by the people in government is a false flag of some type of a national emergency. They have to have the national emergency in hand, in place in the United States of America without telling people about Nibiru coming in. And I put in there, I predicted this because it was an analogy. It's not some kind of a psychic prediction. This is logical prediction of an investigator for 30 years. They will have to use some major event like a thing called Ebola to do the national emergency, or a terrorist event from a group called ISIS to do the national emergency.
I think
or
they're going to do both.
Or a war breaking out with Russia pushing itself too far, or something else with the Red Chinese.
Told that there'll be little notice, possibly 2 weeks or so, before they're given the notice to bug out. Oh, they're also, by the way, they're being shown a map. Advance 4 to 6 weeks is probably pretty likely. Probably not more than 3 or 4 months. So that's our belief. I hope we're wrong. I hope that this turns out to be incorrect information.
We all know the story of Noah and the flood, but according to some researchers, there could be as many as 200 different deluge stories from ancient cultures throughout the world. So this begs the obvious question. In terms of science, what single causality could yield such a global diversity of deluge stories? For that, we look back to 1940, when a Chilean astronomer by the name of Carlos Ferrada first postulated an explanation that accounts for all of these deluge stories. An explanation based on 2 objects. One he calls the Black Star, and the other an object he called Hercules, or what we know today as Planet X or Nibiru. According to Ferrada, Hercules is a large comet planet charged with cosmic energy in an elliptical orbit between the 2 suns of our own solar system, Sol and its smaller, dark twin, Nemesis. A man of great intellect and insight, Ferrada tells us that this object does not follow established celestial laws, which in turn explains its bizarre behaviors. He also predicts that during this next coming flyby, this massive object will come within 14 million kilometers of Earth, and that it will be naked eye visible from every point of the globe. Yes, we will all see it, and we will photograph it. But when will we all come to believe our own eyes? Well, that might be quite another thing. Hopefully, it will be in time for us to find safety from the coming cataclysm. And what shall that be? It will be a horrific event predicted by Edgar Cayce, a great American, and so we call it the Ferrada-Cayce pole shift. And it will happen when these massive objects pass close enough to gain a lithosphere lock on the Earth, thereby pulling the skin of our planet around. This will cause the pole shift predicted by Edgar Cayce over 90 years ago. Carlos Ferrada first began talking about Hercules, or what we call Planet X, Nibiru, in 1940. And through all those decades of talking to audiences and giving TV interviews, in the back of his mind, you know he was seeing the celestial mechanics of the coming global cataclysm we're going to
dependent military families, the husbands and wives of the men and women in the military, has begun conducting briefings for dependents. These would be the dependents that are stationed near the East Coast, the Atlantic Ocean, near the West Coast, the Pacific Ocean, and near the Gulf Coast. At these briefings, they're being told the following: that there's this planetary-sized object called Nibiru that's coming into our solar system. It's going to be causing very severe problems, much more so than it already is, very soon, and that they're being put on standby to bug out. They're being
psychic known as the sleeping prophet, a pole shift. And so, what would the celestial mechanics of such an event look like? It would look like the one that haunted Farada in this 1999 interview late in his life. There are so many things which is unfortunate. Mankind is not ready. The change comes. The destruction comes. And above all, will affect humanity in its existence, in its production, and in its own substance. As our research team watched Farada in this interview, what tore at our hearts were not his words, but rather the obvious pain of awareness etched on his face. We know that pain all too well, for it is an echo of our own, and the knowing of a horrific cataclysm to come, and that which causes it.